The purpose of kata is to perform specific tasks, techniques, movement, attacks, defense. The kata it's a choreographed movement, but it allows one to practice repetitively important movements, footwork, handwork, striking, blocking, that you need to do in Aikido, even though you don't use the weapons in Aikido, hand-to-hand type work. This kata was performed by O Sensei, the founder of Aikido. He did a lot of different katas, and a lot of his students then took some of those, almost each student took a kata and kind of ran with it. This specific kata was then taken up by Koichi Tohei Sensei. He was one of the highest ranking Aikido instructors under O Sensei. He taught this form almost exclusively, as I understand. I'm not an Aikido historian, but from what I understand, Tohei Sensei taught this 21 move kata, and another kata, one of the more commonly practiced katas in Aikido, is a 31 move kata that was taught by Saito Sensei. Saito Sensei was another high-ranking Aikido instructor at Hombu Dojo, and he specialized in doing a lot of weapons works. I found that a lot of people in Aikido nowadays, a lot of instructors, it's not that they don't do weapons work, they do, it's part of the US Aikido Federation curriculum, but back in the day that was Saito Sensei's specialty. He did a lot of weapons work, 31 move kata and some other shorter katas as well. When I first learned the kata, we all learned what he called the attack motions and the defense motions. My understanding, and my instructor doesn't always share his thoughts with people, especially if it has something to do with talking about himself. He's very shy, he's very humble, and he doesn't like to talk about himself. But my understanding, speaking with some other students of his, is that he developed this kata, and he might have had some input with another student of either sword work or the jo, the staff work, but I'm not 100% sure. What he did was he developed the response form, not the attack form. The 21 move kata is an attack form. He developed the response form and called it Katsujin-ken, which is Japanese for the sword that saves. There's two uses of the sword. You can kill with it or you can defend with it. And he liked the philosophy, the moral philosophy of the sword that saves. You can use the sword, you can use a weapon, but you can also use it defensively. And he believed that that is the higher purpose of Aikido. We're not out to hurt each other, we're not out to inflict harm on someone who just happened to have the bad decision to attack us. So the receiving form, the defensive form, is Katsujin-ken, the sword that saves. It's used and it is a very defensive almost entirely. There's two moves that are slightly aggressive, and then at the end of the kata, the last move, the 21 move, is an attack where the defender turns the tables on the attacker. Aikido is a fairly traditional martial art, so there will be techniques, concepts, even required curriculum that is slightly outdated. It's because it's traditional. Tradition isn't always a bad thing. A lot of people might cast aspersions on techniques, on systems, on styles that are traditional, saying they're completely not practical, which is, I understand the validity because people want They want something practical to use. What is the direct use of this in the street? And obviously, very rarely do we walk around the street with a weapon, with a staff, with a sword. But the practical uses for Aikido is to learn the concepts. And the concepts in Aikido are things that are somewhat esoteric and difficult to learn. Blending, timing, distance. When you put a weapon in someone's hand, they become much more aware of the distance between themselves and their partner. It does allow for a little bit more focus and paying much more attention to what you're doing. But at the very basic level, you're practicing movements, footwork movements, hand movements, blocking, striking, and the Aikido concepts of merging with the attack, not stopping it directly, but blending softly and redirecting that energy maybe into another attack. So it does have very practical purposes for Aikido practice, if not practical purposes for self-defense. Using the weapon, my instructor has always said, the weapon is an extension of yourself. So when you're striking with the weapon, it's just an extension of your arm. It's also an extension of your body. All the movements we do in Aikido aren't simply arm movements. They're connected. The arm is connected in the wrist to the elbow, to the shoulder, to the body. So we want to utilize the whole body when performing a movement. There are also some basic movements, for example, footwork. The footwork that we practice when we're doing weapons, katas or weapons, simply a strike with a sword or a thrust with the short staff. You still utilize the footwork and the hand movements that you would also use if you didn't have the weapon. There are a lot of similarities, how we stand, how we move, how we turn. If we can do that with a weapon in our hands, we can also do it empty-handed. Weapons practice in Aikido is traditional. I mentioned that traditions can be good, traditions can be bad. It's another, as I like to tell people, it's another tool in your tool belt of techniques to use. Doesn't mean we should walk around with swords or with staffs, but the concepts are very similar. We learn how to use the sword, we learn how to use the staff, and we use the same basic Aikido techniques, footwork and handwork, body work, that we would if we didn't have the weapon. One aspect of weapon training that I think is important is treating your practice seriously. It's very easy to be casual or cavalier about our practice. Once we're holding a weapon, I find that really focuses our attention. If I were to do a strike or a technique to someone with just empty hands, there's only so much damage I could do. With a weapon in my hand, I could do more. So because I could do that damage, I want to be very aware where my partner is, where I am, where the weapon is. So that really tends to focus us in terms of when we're practicing where to move, how close we want to get or how far we want to get, and we learn that by doing it over and over again. Sometimes we'll make a connection and maybe get a small bruise, but that also goes to the seriousness of the practice. You're not going to get seriously hurt, but you might get a small injury, and sometimes those small injuries tend to focus our actions.